Lesson 1, using properties of real numbers. So first we're going to go over the real numbers and the different collection of numbers that are found in the real numbers. So if we were to draw a Venn diagram, and this section here, this whole entire box, is all the real numbers. Inside real numbers, we have rational numbers and irrational numbers. Irrational numbers is just one set. There's no subsets inside of this one, and the set contains numbers like pi, root 2, root 17, e, root 6. These numbers are non-repeating, non-terminating decimal numbers. Now, rational numbers are any numbers that can be written as a fraction. So we have like 2/3. They can be repeating decimals, 0.3 with a vinculum, -3/4, any of these fractions. Then we have a big subset of rational numbers called integers. Now, integers are all of the negative numbers plus all of the whole numbers, which is a whole nother set. Whole numbers are the number 0 plus all the counting numbers. And counting numbers are the numbers that we count with starting with 1 and so on. So the rational numbers are made up of subsets of integers, whole numbers, and counting numbers. Now there are some properties of real numbers, and we can find those on page 3 and 4 of our book. We have closure of property of real numbers. The first one is closure, which just means if you take and add two real numbers, then their sum is a real number. Or if you multiply two real numbers, A and B, then their product is a real number. That's just called closure. The commutative property of addition just says that if you add two numbers together, the order doesn't matter. And if you multiply, the order doesn't matter. You can just switch the orders. Associative property is when you add three numbers together that are real numbers. If you add the first two, then the third, it's the same thing as if you add the second two and then the first. Same with multiplication. If you multiply the first two and then the third, it's the same thing as multiplying the last two and then the first. And then we have what's called the distributive property. And that's just where if you take a number and multiply it times a sum, we can multiply the number A times each of the addends, and that will be equal to the same thing. There's a couple other properties. One is called the identity property. And for addition, that's just if you add 0 to any number, you get that number again. Or if you switch the order, doesn't matter. The identity property for multiplication is we multiply by 1 to get that same number. So identity is where it keeps the same identity. We add 0 or we multiply by 1. The inverse property just states that if you add the opposite of a number to itself, then you get 0. For multiplication, the inverse property is when you multiply by the reciprocal, you get 1, as long as A doesn't equal 0. So those are the properties of real numbers. And that's the end of lesson 1.